Okay, in this video what we're going to be looking at is raycasting, which allows you to look at an object and interact with it. Just a couple of things to go through just before we get too much further. The very first thing is I'm using the 2x3 layout. Again, you can use any layout you wish. It's up to you what one you pick. The other component that I'll talk about is you'll see a lot of stuff down here. This is basically a whole heap of different asset packs, mostly bought off the asset store, that I'll be using for a number of videos. But if you see an underscore in the folder, that's one that's been created, and there's more than likely a video associated with it. At the moment, this is the first one, so you'll see that's completely empty. Just quickly to show around the map, it's just a plain ground and a very simple wall. And the other thing is the FPS controller, and the modifications I've made to that. It is the Unity 5 FPS controller. The modifications is I turned off the head bob, and I also increased the X and Y sensitivity, purely because those two things really annoy me when I'm trying to develop, and I can fine tune those later. Anyway, so what we're going to do first is we're actually going to create a script for that raycast. So I'm going to right click on the assets window, and you'll see that I've done that in the underscore scripts folder. Right click, create, and we're programming in C#. I'm going to call that raycast, and then I'm going to call it -check for stuff, just so I kind of know what it is. And what you'll notice is as soon as I've saved that, it's got raycast -check for stuff. Now there is a parsing error, and we'll have a look at that in a second. And I'm going to double click and open it up. I'm going to reload if you do get that error message. And you'll notice that a namespace cannot directly contain members such as fields or methods. And if you have a quick look how I've got this raycast word, it doesn't like it. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do two things. Because this is my actual class name, if I change this here, I'm also going to have to change the name of that document there. And because this is the very first document I've done, I'm going to do something much easier. Close that one, go back to Unity, and delete that script. So again, I'm going to try that one again. Create, C#, and I'm going to call this something else. Checking for stuff. No idea what happened there, but checking for stuff. All right. So you'll see checking for stuff. If I open up that one, I shouldn't have a problem at all. Okay. So from here, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the Scripting AI tab. And you'll notice that I've already searched for physics.raycast, but if you were unsure, I'm going to just search for raycast. You get a whole heap of different options. Generally speaking, the first one that it puts up is usually the best one in this beginner stage, but sometimes you have to look around if you haven't been specific enough. So once I load that, I'm going to do this very, very simply, and I'm going to copy and paste my example. Now there's a couple of things when you're copy pasting an example to look out for. The very first one, where you've actually got these using words. Now we'll go into what they are later, but we've actually already got that there. And we've also got this public class and the name of what our document was. Checking for stuff. Checking for stuff. So we've really got to be careful what we click. And what we select from that example. So they've actually got a script called example class, and that's not what we want. Then they've got void update. Oh, well, we've got void update too. So one of the main things that we can actually do is we've got this function void update. In my scripting reference, I can copy everything inside that void update. Right click, copy, go back to my script, and inside my update function, right click and go paste. Now one of the big things that you've got to remember is make sure you haven't deleted anything, particularly the curly brackets. Now one thing I like to do on every script is, even if I'm not using the function, I always like to put it down so I can see them match in pairs. The only other one is, and not many people actually do this, is I also do it for the class, and top and bottom, so you can actually see where the pairs match, and it makes it so much easier to try and problem solve. Just be aware that that one warning down there is from one of those asset packs I was talking about before, so I'll untick that for you so you're not confused. Control S to save, and I'm going to go back to Unity and see what I get. Okay, so it's loaded the script for me. My console hasn't loaded any errors, again, except for those yellow ones which are from the asset packs. And I'm going to just change my layout to that 2x3. And the reason why I'm doing this is so I can see the game and also see what's going on. So I'm going to go and hit play. And you'll kind of see my player kind of walk around just to make him a little bit stand out a bit more. I'll select him. Okay, so you can see the camera, he's looking around. And one of the things you'll actually see, I'll just bring up the console, is as soon as he starts looking, nothing is really happening. And the reason for that, I can't believe it, I forgot to put on the script. So just make sure that whenever you've done your script, make sure you drag and drop it on, and also just make sure that it does actually stick onto it. Okay, so just drag and drop onto the icon will work. Hit play. So you'll see I'm standing right near my wall. Just drag this one out. And what you'll see, if I select the right item, you'll see my first person controller, and as soon as I start looking at the wall, you'll see that number going up. So we're looking at this number up here, 190. As soon as I start looking at that wall, as soon as I look away. The other thing I'll do is I'm going to just walk away from my wall, so watch that number go up, 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 and it stops. And that's that distance value that's set. So it's roughly 10, where that's twigging in. There's a couple of problems with this though, and if I zoom into the shade, you'll actually see that quite well. There's nothing really, and I might even pause that and zoom in. There's nothing really telling me which way the direction of the ray is going. So what I'm actually going to do is in Visual Studio, after I've unticked play, in Visual Studio, I'm actually going to come in and do something called a debug.drawRay. So debug.drawRay. Now you can't just have it by itself, that's not going to work. You actually have to have all the settings. So you need a vector 3 start, and what we're going to use is we're going to actually use this transform.position. And then it needs a direction, so I'm going to put in forward. The final thing is I can actually do a color, and if I type in color dot, let's just say blue, or let's go green, and finish with the semicolon, you'll actually see that you get something. Now I have actually made a mistake there, so the way I'm going to do this, and mistakes do occur, so I'm going to come up to my scripting, type in drawRay, because that's what I want to do. There's those key terms that you need to know what to do. Now there's two different ones. Which one do I pick? Well, debug.drawRay draws a line from start to the start direction. So I'm going to select that and look at the example and have a look. They've got debug.drawRay, transform.position, forward. Now one thing to note, that forward matches that forward. So what ours is our forward matches this forward. So they're actually matching. The one thing I've noticed though, capitalization is key. That's a capital C, that wasn't, and that's what was causing my error. Again, these are just key things that, one of those things that you just really want to try and remember, that you can do a debug.drawRay. Control S to save, go back to Unity, and I'm going to hit play again, and that doesn't really help us at all until I kind of zoom out so we can start to see. And you'll see this green line moving around. Now that green line in the scene window is basically where we are looking. So as soon as I start looking at the wall, that's right. But it's really hard to see that, and you'll also notice that as I blick up, it's still looking forward. It doesn't actually move with where the camera goes. And I'm pointing out that big camera view just here. Okay, so that doesn't move, it just only puts it in that forward direction of the character. That's not exactly what we want, but it works. It keeps on giving us our error message when it's looking at it. And specifically, just to clarify again, it is looking at the collider. So if I was to actually come in, there will be a collider, or the controller acts as a collider, sorry. So the character controller is a collider. And another way, what I mean by that is if I select the wall, you'll see that that's actually a collider, and it's looking for that when the raycasts work. So rather than having it just looking forward rather than up, if I'm looking up, I want my view to be looking up as well. So we've got to change a couple of things. The very first one is this forward. Forward isn't really where I want to go through, so I'm going to change a couple of things. The very first one is I'm going to change that word forward with my ray. And let's do it this way. Now, my ray is going to be a little bit different. Then I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to go through and do a debug. Now, I don't want the transform dot position. I want that to be my ray. And again, I'm actually going to copy this whole line. Don't want it to be transformed dot position. I want it to be my ray. So you'll actually see a whole heap of different things going on here, and to be honest, that's starting to get really confusing. So let's just focus on these two lines here. So what we've actually got is the first one is I'm looking at a ray, not a vector 3. A vector 3 is an X, Y, Z, not a raycast. So I'm actually going to change that vector 3 to what is known as a ray. And careful of the color, ray is the type of variable and my ray is the name of the variable. It means I can use that word my ray. I could use rubber duck if I wanted to, but it means it has information that is a ray type of information. Whereas the forward has a vector 3, which is an X, Y, and Z. And you'll notice that this won't work for what we want. So this particular part, and you can actually search a number of different tutorials to actually help you with this. Same with the documentation, and there's probably more efficient ways to do this, but this is probably the easiest that I've found. So the very first thing I've got is screen point to ray. So basically it's where the screen is looking. And if you think back to that camera, and you'll see that box appear in a second. Where are we? Of course. And you'll see that box where that's all stretching out. That's the camera screen, where it's looking and what it's seeing. So what we want to focus on is this vector 3. The screen point to ray means basically what we're seeing. And this vector 3 is going to have 3 components in it. And we need to finish it off. Now you'll notice that there's a couple of errors. I'll need an X, a Y, and a Z. I'll put too many of those in. So that's not going to work for us. So I'm going to do a couple of things. The very first one is, what is my screen made up of? Well, my screen has a width. I'll just zoom out for you. So my screen does have a width. My Y is going to be my screen dot height. And my Z, I don't want to go into the screen for my ray, so that will be 0. Now, one of the main things that I've got is that screen dot width and screen dot height is going to put it down in this bottom corner of what I'm seeing, which isn't where I want it. I want it in the dead center. Now, to get the center, if I have my full width going all the way across, I can cut that in 2 and I get this dead center. And I can do the same with my height and it cuts it dead center, so I get this cross. So if I come in and go screen.width divided by 2 and screen.height divided by 2, all of a sudden I'm going to be getting that dead center point. Okay, Now, the next thing that I'm actually going to have to do is I've got my ray defined. That's where it's starting from. It's dead center of the screen. That's all that line does. So for now, I'm actually going to comment out that first line that wasn't working for us. Now, there's a lot of errors. Hold off. That's fine. We'll go through them as we go. And to be honest, let's just comment out everything. And I'm going to have to do that manually because I can't remember where it is. Okay, so one of the main things you'll see is this debug.drawRay, and it's got this myRay, but drawRay, first off, if we go back to our scripting reference, needs a position first. So vector3 start, so where is it starting from? Well, rays have something special about them, where I've got this as a ray type. I can actually go myRay.origin, and you'll see that origin is there listed. It's basically where the ray is starting. The next one that we're talking about is direction. Again, I'm going to go back to the scripting reference, and you'll see that vector3 dir, and dir is a direction and length of the ray. So again, I'm going to go back to my other script and write in direction. Now that's not going to work for us, and even neither is dir. Remember, I am talking about my ray, which is the one that I defined up here. The last one is I can keep the color green. That's not going to matter. The last part of this is if physics raycast my ray forward, that's not defined properly anymore. So again, I'm going to have to come in and go .origin and myRay.direction, because if you remember the raycast, and I'm just bringing that back up in the scripting reference, and you can do that in a browser if you're not using Visual Studio. It has an origin and then a direction and then its distance for that very first example. So I'm going to save this. And remember, anything with those slashes are commented out, which means the computer will not run it. Going back to Unity. Wait for it to compile. Bring up my console, hit clear, and then hit play. So you'll notice that all of a sudden it has stopped. Now if I look at the ground, it actually looks at the ground now. If I actually look at the wall, it actually goes up. If I look up above the wall, you can see that that green line is following everywhere where the camera goes, and that is the best way to work. Now for the next part, in terms of being able to collect an item, that is a little bit different on top of it, but let's clean up this code first. First off, let's get rid of that example that we started with. Delete, delete, and delete. So we've started with an example, we modified the code, and that, what I've done, does actually take a bit of experience and practice. So don't get disheartened if you're a little bit confused, but ask questions when something doesn't make sense for that clarification. To actually detect something, you need to process it in here, and you need to find out what the collider is or what the name of that object is. And if you have any queries about that, sing out or see some of my other videos. Cheers.